Welcome, everybody. You've arrived at the Before It's Built podcast. This is the second episode that we've recorded, and it'll be going out over the next couple of weeks. On the podcast today, I've got Paul Charteris from SaveBOARD, a circular economy manufacturer that turns everyday packaging waste into circular building products, helping construction rethink what materials can be made from. It has two manufacturing plants, one in Hamilton, New Zealand, and one in Sydney, Australia. And before SaveBOARD was started in 2019. Paul was a qualified mechanical engineer, initially working in the energy sector, but eventually moving into vertical and modular construction. He's at the forefront of proving that lower carbon materials can be practical and scalable. Hope I got that all right, Paul. If there's anything wrong in there, please, pull me up on that one.
No, sounds great, Barry, and thanks for having me. And I hope to get you to write my CV in the future.
Nice. Yeah, it's always easier to write about other people. It's never easy to write about yourself, is it?
No.
Before I go into the SaveBOARD products, I was watching on your LinkedIn feed over the last couple of days, and you've just been back from the Future Build Australia conference. Was there anything there that really stood out as kind of, future around circular economy, circular materials, or even just the industry as a whole? Anything that kind of got your wheels spinning?
Look, it was pretty full on few days actually. I had a bit of a look around, the different stalls. There was a real mixture of some stuff that's been around for ages through to some cool platforms that are coming through as sort of new innovative. Look, I think like we did a sort of a bit of a collab with X-Frame, and it was great to sort of see some ANZ businesses sort of, I think we're definitely leading the charge in a lot of areas. So
cool display that you guys have, the way the SaveBOARD fits directly into the X-Frame.
Yeah, no, it was cool. Look, it was we had heaps of people come and ask us whether we actually made the X-Frame, and we're like, no, that's a friend of ours, because normally it's actually fixed on top of the actual frame itself. But we hope we got a few good leads for them, and it definitely generated some interest.
It's a cool system. I actually saw X-Frame up at OpenStar in Wellington. So the fission reactor that they're creating, they've got the X-Frame built around it, and it's quite cool to see those two technologies in the same room with each other. A timber product and a new energy product, hopefully, to the market. It's cool to see the innovation there. New Zealand has got something going for it when it comes to innovation. When we talk about construction waste, Paul, a lot of people are thinking about the end of a build or the end of a process where in building construction where they've come and have waste materials left over at the end. You're kind of flipping that on the head with your product, SaveBOARD, where you're actually turning the waste products back into building products so that we're building buildings from waste. Can you take us back a little bit and tell us where the origin of all this actually came from? Where did the idea come from? How did you actually start? Where did the funding come from?
Yeah, look, the sort of the 2-minute summary, building on from your great introduction, was that I was doing some work with Fonterra, which is a New Zealand milk company, and they were looking at what to do with their Tetra Pak or food and beverage cartons. And they actually identified this company in America called Rewall, and it's basically doing what we are doing, but an earlier version. I went over there in, I think it was 2017, and I saw the plant and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. I sort of didn't believe that you could sort of make building products out of basically waste packaging without any glues or adhesives. And then I sort of came back pretty excited. Unfortunately, Fonterra wasn't very keen to actually do building materials themselves, which I can sort of understand because it's not their core business. And then the company I was working for, Dialogue Fitzroy, which is sort of Malaysian-based company, they were initially keen to sort of, branch out to it. And they decided it wasn't for them either. And it was basically going to be, I guess, archived to the sort of the rubbish bin. But I talked to my CEO at the time and I said, look, I'm pretty passionate about this. And look, in my spare time, I'll see if I can make this a reality. So that started probably about a 2-year process of, importing materials, doing due diligence, getting some testing done at places like Scion to see if it was going to be suitable for the Australian and New Zealand building markets, created an IM or information memorandum, and then started going out to companies or high net worth individuals who I thought might have enough money to make it reality, because it's, we're talking a fair few $1 million to build a plant. So I think it was October 2020, which was in the middle of COVID, I managed to get my sort of first sort of cornerstone shareholder, which was actually Freightways, which are listed ASX and NZX listed company, which, they do everything from TMIG to Shredx to Medex to, NZ Couriers and frozen goods. And they were looking at sort of third horizon opportunities, and they are ultimately part of their businesses in the, waste to value industry. And after that, I managed to secure about another 6 other shareholders, and that was enough money to place an order for a plant December 2020, literally the 24th of December, just before Christmas. And that sort of started about a 11-month process to getting the plant here in Hamilton. And at the same time, while I was sort of, trying to project manage the build, was that we applied for a grant with the Recycling Modernisation Fund in New South Wales. I think about October 21, just before the New Zealand plant was about to arrive, we actually secured a $1.8 million grant from the Recycling Modernisation plant.
Nice.
And that was a catalyst to actually place an order for the Australian plant. I think we'd only been operating for about a month by the time we purchased. So it was like double down, which is kind of crazy in lots of ways, but we thought, why not? So, that's sort of the crazy ride from, having a 9-to-5 job and steady income to craziness of a startup and running
It's a huge leap.
business.
It would have been a lot of travel at the beginning as well, probably even still to this day, is it?
Yeah, my poor wife, she's very understanding, and she's got her own business. And I think last year was 13 weeks I was away from home. So
yeah. I'm assuming is there plans for another plant in Australia, or is that top secret at the moment?
No. Look, I think probably the reality would be expanded footprints. So when we design both plants, that you can basically double the capacity by bolting on some extra pressing capacities. So I think the next plant would be in either Europe or America. We've got some, even though there's a number of plants in America, they're all sort of focused on like a roofing, like a cover board sort of commercial roofs. But whereas we've sort of gone down the more, let's call it architectural, in a lot of the products we make, as well as, there's products hidden behind walls like our rigid air barriers. But the American plants they just focus on roof cover boards, which are, buried under the roofing membranes. So you don't actually get to see the sort of the DNA of the product itself.
Yeah, it's definitely got a look to it. It's some people love that whole circular economy and actually being able to see things be put back to use. And I think you guys are doing a fantastic job of actually showing that off, and obviously coming up with new innovative products as well to put different finishes on it. And we'll go into that in a bit more detail later. But when you started talking about the origin story, you started talking about the waste problem that obviously Fonterra had from their Tetra Pak. Is that where you got your feedstock from? Is that for your New Zealand plant?
Yeah, look, it's when we first started, it sounds almost ironic now, is that we were sort of struggling to get the right feedstock, but now we, even got contacted from the Netherlands this morning's asking if we can take some of their product and use it as feedstock. So I could probably build 100 plants now, but the key is around, demand-driven offtake, because we are a circular business. Every kg that comes into our business we've got to sell a kg of finished products. Our main ingredients are, Tetra Pak type cartons. So in Australia, our main source is the container deposit scheme, the return and earn, where you've got your little 10-cent sort of refund on the back of them. So that's our main feedstock for our cartons. And then the soft plastics, in New Zealand and Australia, we get it through the soft plastic stewardship scheme, or the packaging forum in New Zealand. So we're actually on ABC News in Australia as the relaunch of the soft plastics recycling scheme in Australia, with sort of there's videos of our factory and our products being shown. So yeah, it's pretty cool to sort of be at the forefront of, trying to add value to these waste streams that we have in the market.
What do you use to bind it all together, Paul? Like, so you got the Tetra Pak and you got the soft plastics. What holds it all together?
Well, that's the cool thing. It's actually the soft plastics is actually the binders. Some people think we make a plastic board, but most of our products are only about 20 to 30% soft plastics, which is our glue and adhesive. And if you look at the breakdown of like plywood or OSB or chipboard, they're around about 20-25% glue, and they mainly use urea formaldehyde as the common engineered glue. So if you actually put the soft plastics waste stream and urea formaldehyde side by side, their mechanical, structural properties and resistance to chemicals and melting points are actually almost identical. You wouldn't actually be able to tell if you took the name off them and said which one's soft plastics, which one's urea formaldehyde. They're actually they're very close.
Yeah, it's cool. We'll go into a bit of performance a little bit later, but it's great to see that there's comparable performance between the materials. And I'm assuming that a little bit later you're going to be telling me that there's some advantages as well. But I guess just to go back to a bit more basic around the product itself, for an architect, because we do have architects and engineers that will be watching this. You mentioned OSB board and a few other things there. Is that are they direct replacements for those? Wherever you have OSB board, you can use SaveBOARD?
Yeah, like I guess the whole sort of basis of, when I created, I guess, SaveBOARD was we were trying to make products that are a direct replacement or alternative to those traditional products, where we haven't tried to invent a new product that's completely different that, is so. For example, if I we have a paper face product, that's what we call it, which is the closest we have to a plasterboard. It's got better properties and many attributes, but we use the same screws, the same fixing spacings. We have a tapered joint if people want to, plaster it. So we've actually tried to make them as close as we can to the traditional product, and the same thing with all our products. With everything from bracing to strength and density and thickness. Like our paper face is 10 millimeters, and we do a sort of a 12, 13 millimeters, which is the same as what plasterboard. So if you use SaveBOARD, you're not trying to have to use a 16 millimeter board when all your reveals and all your windows are all different. We've tried as far as possible to make them almost identical from all those sort of things that we can control. And then our products do have unique properties. So some of them are the same, some of them are better, some of them are worse. They're not a silver bullet for every traditional product out there, but we've sort of picked the ones that we can perform better than or similar to existing materials.
So as an architect and you're specifying wall linings, like you're obviously specifying plasterboard pretty much everywhere. Should they be looking at SaveBOARD, and where should they be looking at SaveBOARD? Is can you go into a building and just go, you know what, look, we'll put SaveBOARD everywhere? Or should they be kind of going, it goes into certain rooms or it goes on certain feature walls, or, we will use it sparingly? How should they replace everything?
Good questions. In an ideal world, I'd say replace everything because that's obviously good. But I'm pragmatic as well. And like if a lot of projects, have budget constraints. So if I talk residential first, our product isn't as smooth as plasterboard. So if a client wants a flat monolithic painted look in double black, white, or grey or beige, then the reality is they should use plasterboard. And I say that because, if they want SaveBOARD to look like plasterboard, they'll spend a whole heap of money on plastering to get to achieve the flatness. However, it's one of actually our biggest sellers in the commercial environment because, people are more willing to accept maybe a slightly textured look. You get the carbon benefits, the durability. Like our board is, it paints like plasterboard, but it's like a plywood. If I was to give you a piece, which I'm pretty sure you've had, it's super rock hard. You could literally, if you had it in a school or you could have the kids beat it, running into it, and you're not going to put a hole through it. So you get a number of other benefits. So yes, an example in Wellington, we did Bowen Street campus for, with LT McGuinness, which I think was Precinct Properties, and they actually put our product as, there was a double layered system. So they put SaveBOARD as the first layer, then they overlaid with plasterboard. So they got a dual benefit. They got the carbon saving because we've got a obviously a great carbon saving, but they got the finish of the plasterboard rather than having 2 layers of plasterboard. The SaveBOARD was enough to actually drop that whole system to actually a carbon sink rather than a.
So what I'm hearing there is effectively it's a better performer than a plasterboard finish from a carbon perspective. From
Correct.
how about weight? Is it weight wise plasterboard to SaveBOARD?
It's about 10% heavier, so we're not
Okay.
talking a couple of kgs a sheet, so it's not massively.
Yeah, from an
different.
installation perspective, it's good. And then from a strength perspective, obviously you guys have a braceline type product.
Correct.
So again, it's fairly strong material as well. Is that standard strong,
Yeah,
or is
so
it viewed?
I guess the maybe from simplicity, we have one product that does probably, let's say, 70% of the different applications. All the brands, they probably have about 10 different. They have a standard and they have a bracing one, they have a noise one, they have a high impact one. Our product, we don't differentiate. You buy it, but you actually get excellent bracing capacity, is the same or better than those bracing plasterboards. You get the noise benefits because you've got a sort of slightly higher density. You get the impact resistance. So you sort of get it all on one board rather than you don't have to buy all these different variations to achieve the same outcome.
Which makes it a hell of a lot logistically easier on sites to control materials then as well. And when it comes to site installation, is there, I know you said it's the same screws effectively used in it and it's slightly heavier. Is there any other installation process a little bit different from normal that people should be aware of?
If you're not needing bracing, we actually tell people to use a brad nail or a panel pin. So it's super fast, more like a plywood. If you don't need bracing, then just basically go crazy with a brad nailer because it's so much quicker than even with your collated screw guns. They're still slow-ish and still a bit painful. Whereas you can
have a lot quicker.
quicker.
Nice.
So
and there's no issue with cutting these boards on site. Like how do they cut them, and then what do they do with the wastage, with anything that they have left over?
So the way I explain to people is that if you can work with plywood, you can work with our products. So it's not a scribe and snap. You've got to use mechanical tools. So that's probably compared to plasterboard, it's a slower process. So the way we counter that is that generally your commercial projects are bigger volumes. What we do is we actually provide sort of a free cut to length service. So if that you've got a stud height of, I don't know, let's say it's 2,850, that because it's going in a retrofitted building, we'll give the client that product to that exact length. It takes a little bit more effort for them to work out what the material takeoff, but then there's limited cutting on site because you're not having to have another join. We're making tomorrow a rigid air barrier for a client that's 3,880 millimeters, and that's the exact length they need to go from the soffit to below the joist for a modular house.
I think technology is moving forward fairly quickly from a design perspective as well. Now you can see, we see models coming into us that we can actually run cutting schedules from. So when it comes to wall finishes, you could actually just run the model through, identify which walls you're looking at, and it'll actually produce all of the cutting sizes for those. It becomes very relevant, obviously, when you're looking at a product like yours that can be pre-manufactured off-site to size and then brought to site. When you're putting them on the wall, is there a tape or a stop or anything on them like normal plasterboard you have to do?
Yes. So like on that internal lining, we have two options: a square edge or a taped edge. We normally try and tell people to go down the square edge route because we actually promote not actually plastering it at all and just accept, it saves cost and money, and just put a small iris on the edge. So you will see a fine line, but then you're cutting out that whole plastering trade. If you really want to tape and plaster, we have a little trick where you basically, instead of when you do that skim over the joint, you don't let it dry off. You basically run a dry roller over it. So you're effectively putting in a small texture into that joint, because the worst thing you can do is let it dry and then you sand it, and then you get this transition between a smooth and you just can't get rid of it. Where if you want a tapered edge, you need to sort of basically texture the joint before it sets.
I mentioned waste a while ago. So when they do offcuts on site, can that be sent back to you guys, or where does
Yeah,
how is it recycled?
yeah, 100%. All our we will take any of our product back at off cuts, end of life. The only catch is they have to give a shit and actually take the time to actually send it back. So we ask our clients whether they want any bulk bags. So we literally just provide these 1 cubic meter bulk bags, which we just literally strap to the top to the pallet, and then once they're full, they just send them back. And look, unless they're in the middle of nowhere, it's normally still cheaper to send the offcuts back than it is to send to landfills. I just obviously putting things in a skip bin is nice and easy, but it's not great for the planet. And we can actually provide a cost saving and a
Yep, and you're paying to get rid of it. And at the end of the day, most construction sites now have a waste management plan, and those waste management plan thresholds are coming down continually as to
yes,
what can actually go off site, so and what needs to go and go back into the economy, into the circular economy. So you're actually making it easier to create waste management plans because you're taking the headache off of them by actually having the material back to you guys. It's quite cool. I do see again on social media that you guys are working with the likes of KFC, Woolworths, Bunnings are stocking you guys. That must come with a huge benefit to you guys in the market, just the visibility that these large companies are selecting your materials. What did you have to do to convince them, or did it just fit so perfectly into their existing, where our net zero plan or sustainability plans?
some of them were easy, some of them were very difficult. Some of them were I'm an engineer. Marketing doesn't come naturally to me, but I've done a few things that have got their attention, like Woolworths. I actually, this is early on. I actually took my kids. I think they had these Woolworths bricks in how they give away things, and I took my kids' packages and I actually created a customized board that I put all their branding in it, and I stole all I ripped up the packaging from home and created a custom board, and I sent it to their exec team in Australia, and it ended up in their board meeting, and that sort of started the conversation that led to me meeting them, to then being tested, multiple stores. That's ultimately led to, probably in two years ago, we became part of their design specification, and now we've been used in over 200 stores. Yeah, like KFC, I actually created a KFC board out of literally brought a whole bunch of KFC food and then created a board that got, whereas some of the others like Big W, that was sort of a momentum, which are ultimately owned by Woolworths groups. We got the link into those, but some of them were a bit of engineered marketing to get noticed.
Yeah, you can actually buy your product now in Bunnings
Correct.
as well as go see them in Woolworths.
Yeah. So just one of our products, you can actually go into Bunnings in the retail area in the pre-cut section where you can buy covings and quarter of a sheets. So yeah, that's pretty exciting. Like we've always been able to buy our products if you go to the trade counter and you say, I want 10 sheets of exposed black, and they'll place an order with us, and then like a week later it'll come back to store and you go and pick it up. But this is our first foray into actually the retail store where mum and dad DIYers can go in there and decide to buy it and use it.
Even an architect watching this, if you want to go out there and tangibly see a product before you specify it, you know what I mean? You don't have to go ask you guys for it. You can actually just walk into a Bunnings and have a look.
Yeah, and on that, one of the things we've actually just created, and is actually live yesterday, we've spent a couple of weeks collating probably 1,000 projects, and we've created like a project map or portfolio map in Australia and New Zealand. So you can actually go onto either website and it just shows you all these pins, and it will tell you what it is and where it is. It doesn't include any residential and private offices because obviously people can't go and see them. But for example, you can, and if you're in Sydney, you can actually zoom up on the map and you can see, hey, there's Australian Museum. So you can go and see, that's a location, or you can go to Woolworths, Balmain, or in Auckland, you can go to the Tamaki recycling centre to see our products. So it literally has all these pins on the map that you can actually go and see, which we think is pretty good for, we've got lots of pictures, but that's actually real places people can go and see them.
Yeah, it's good, great communication tool. But as you said, it's also the ability for, again, people or specifiers to tangibly go look and touch and feel one of your products before they specify it. Good resource to have. Misconceptions. Are there any out there? Or are there any ones that you kind of go, I keep coming across this one that people keep telling me something about my product that is completely incorrect?
Yeah, look, probably that first one, people think it's a plastic board, and like nothing against plastic, but we have one product that's 100% plastic, but all the other sort of 7 are only maybe 20 to 30%. Probably cost is another one that people think that because it's sustainable or green that it's a premium. So we've worked really hard to make our products like our Bunnings product. I actually think I've priced it too cheap. No, it's literally $35 for a half sheet. It's actually $10 a sheet less than plywood in the same aisle. And so our rigid air barrier, for example, is the lowest in the market. I can't find any other product in the market that's lower cost than ours. So we've worked really hard to make it. Cost is not a barrier. We want people to look at our products because, number one, it performs really well and it's the same or better. And number two, it's price competitive. And then number three is actually planet. My sort of 3 Ps, that's the icing on the cake, that it's sustainable, it's, circular, it's got the carbon savings and all those other good things it has. But I'm not trying to sell that as the main point of difference. I'm trying to sell on performance and price and then planet.
Yep. I think that's the critical thing right now, is that for sustainability to succeed and for our product specifically to succeed, it's got to be viable.
Yes.
It's got to have some competitive advantage or be financially more viable than the next thing that comes along. It's like the LED light bulb. It performs better. It needs to be replaced less often, and it costs less to manufacture and replace itself afterwards. So if you can get that trifecta of performance, which it sounds like you guys are getting, particularly for your rigid air barrier, makes perfect sense. Everybody should be specifying it in that area. Just one or two last questions for you. Policy-wise, both Australia and New Zealand, you're operating across two different borders. Do you see a different policy or different legislation and policy incentives that you get to deal with, or negatives that you have to deal with for your products? So, is it like, are they heading in different directions, or are New Zealand and Australia heading in the same direction?
Look, if you'd asked me 5 years ago when I started the first manufacturer, New Zealand would sort of be more open and more, sort of like accepting of our product. I'd actually say it's reverse. Australia, through both policy and, companies are more willing, more open and willing to try products. They still do their due diligence, but, we do twice the volume of product in Australia than we do New Zealand. Obviously, there's the population, but we've only got still the same capacity in the same plant. We haven't got more people doing sales. It's just there's everything. Some of it's still coming, in terms of legislation, but most states now have at least a document or out for discussion around circular procurement and recycled content on projects. So I think some of the states like Victoria have, if it's a government project over $8 million, there's a certain amount of recycled content that needs to be as one of the key metrics. So I think, to my mind, Australia's, is winning this race at the moment, and New Zealand, if we don't sort of, we need to be open to products like ours. We still has to show that it does have the performance and meets the standards to, but
stand on its own feet. Yep. Completely get it. Same experience with us. We found it a little bit easier across in Australia. Far more open doors, far more people prepared to take on something new, give something a go and see if it'll work for them. So it's I think it's driven both by culture and by policy that we're seeing in both countries. We need to loosen up a little bit more in New Zealand, and legislation needs to push on here as well a little bit. And it's great to see that Australia is in a lot of regions now with their NCC, their construction standards and their climate legislation is always moving forward. So it gives a little bit of hope. Listen, Paul, thanks for coming on today. If anybody watching the podcast wants to see a bit more or read a bit more about SaveBOARD, you'll get them at saveboard.nz. Paul, as I said, thank you very much for jumping on with us. I'll talk to you again soon.
No, thanks, Barry, and hope people found this interesting. And just jump on our website. I've also got a Australian website, .com.au. So yeah, they're almost identical, but one has all the Australian standards and testing that we've had to do there. So otherwise, just reach out. And thanks again, Barry. And awesome.
Thanks, Paul.
Yes.